Lawyers who read wills to families. What is the most interesting, bizarre, offensive, surprising thing you have had to read out loud? My grandfather hated his neighbor. They lived next to each other for 20 plus years. I remember well my grandfather raging at every opportunity about this guy. We never saw them speak to each other. In grandpa's will he left the guy $10K, a car and golf clubs. We were dumbstruck. Turns out they were good buddies from the army. When they coincidentally bought homes next to each other, they decided to play a long scam with both their families. They actually played golf together 2-3x per week and had a monthly poker game for years. That's an extremely long con. I like your grandpa's style. To my daughter Anne, who created my beautiful granddaughter Jane, and her dear fourth husband John, who laid hands on my Jane, I leave $1 you money grubbing bastards. To Jane I'll leave all of my monetary assets, save $5,000 and my best gun which I'll leave to my son Bill, on the condition that he beats John bloody during the time between my funeral and my burial. Jane, bail your uncle out of jail, please. Other than names, this is the exact wording of a great uncle's will. Part of it anyway. At age 9 Jean told her mother that John had groped her and her mother told her she deserved it for being a S. So great uncle took Jean in and raised her, and his 2 kids got exactly what it says. His son also got a truck and technically a house, although he only kept it until Jean was a legal adult and could afford the tax on it. Bill got full custody of Jane when his father died and he put every penny of her money into a trust fund to mature when she was 25 because he felt like his sister would try to get the money. He was right. And in case anyone wondered, yes, Bill got his $5,000. He didn't get arrested though because John had a warrant on him so they didn't dare call the cops. Bill did kindly inform the police of his whereabouts a few weeks later. That is beautiful. Something about revenge from beyond the grave, or at least on the way to it. Not a lawyer, but sort of a sad story. When my dad's mother died, her will stipulated that everything was to be liquidated and the money distributed equally between her children and grandchildren. Fine, but literally everything had to be sold. There were family heirlooms, jewelry, things my grandfather, a carpenter, had made, so many sentimental family things that my father and his siblings badly wanted, but it all had to be sold. They all went to the auction to try to buy some of the more sentimental items but weren't always successful. It was heartbreaking and I'm not sure what made my grandmother think it would be a good idea. Nobody wanted the money. They wanted her wedding ring and the clocks my grandfather had made and all that. I used to work for an accountant and we used to make wills as well. An old man probably around 70 left all his money to his mistress while his wife only got the goldfish. I had to tell him that if his wife contested it she would most definitely win. He said he didn't care. Goldfish, the estate that smiles back. Not me but my friend's father's father died and he said when the guy reviewed the will with his lawyer and his sister, it said to give 100% of the assets to his sister. He said he had no idea why his father did that. He wasn't on bad terms or anything. It was shocking to him. The sister didn't share anything with him either, and they were on pretty good terms before that. When my great uncle died he left his beloved dog to his longtime girlfriend. All of his money went into a pet trust for said dog, which turned out to be quite a large sum of money. His 2 kids got nothing. As far as I know he didn't have a bad relationship with them or anything. He just thought the world of his little dog. One summer I worked as an administrative assistant to a lawyer who worked in wills and estates. Most of it was the usual petty arguing about percentages of money, but one couple was deeply concerned about which of their children would receive the urn with the ashes of the family's long deceased cat. Wouldn't want to play favorites. One of my college buddies' dad died from cancer in our 2nd year. It wasn't a sudden death. He had been battling it for a couple years. When my friend came back to school, he casually mentioned that his dad left him and his sister $7 million each. Turns out, his dad had hit the lottery before my friend was born, invested, put all the money away to help pay for college, high school. His mom got a nice chunk of change also. He grew up thinking they were just ordinary middle class family. We had a glorious 3rd and 4th year of college, thanks to my loaded friend. Someone had left an entire golf course that he owned and managed in secret to his son. They were avid golfers, but always went to another course. I still don't know why someone would lie about owning a golf course. My will has something unusual. Story time. I sat my wife down to have the talk because I was getting ready to deploy to Iraq. This was during the incredible sectarian violence, and I wanted to make sure she knew everything to do in case I died. She's never serious, ever, but I wanted her to be serious for this discussion because it was damned important. I get through telling her all about it, and want to know if she has questions. Yeah, so, the life insurance. How does that work? She says. I don't really know, baby. What do you mean? She answers. Well, do they just put the money in there? Look, she's not trying to be a butthole, right? It's not like she's just dying for the money. She wants to know the logistics of it. I'm sitting here thinking when she says, so do they put in my bank account? Or do they give you one of those big checks when you win the lottery? As she holds her hands up like she's holding a huge check. Laughter ensues. I have it written into the will that if I'm Kia, I want the $400k to be given to her with a gigantic lottery check. Have base photo bring several folks over, shoot like the paparazzi as she stands on a stage, and do it. Not exactly a reading of the will story, but in the same realm. When I was like 20, my dad told me that when he died I would be getting a chunk of money. Not millions, but enough to do something good with. Years later he and my mom separated. He met a new woman and got married. After talking to my brother and sister, we were all worried that she would change his will or get him to change it in favor of her kids. We agreed that we didn't want money but just wanted any final wishes to be honored. The money couldn't hurt though. Sadly, after that he got cancer and died 2 years ago. After he died, my siblings and I agreed to just accept however his widow divided anything. She made sure things went where he had decided. My percentage was smaller because he had added her and her children. In the 2 years since he passed, she hasn't talked to us much. She calls for holidays and stuff. She tries, but she is just kinda awkward. She's also sent large sums of money on 2 occasions because she sold some land he owned. She has shown me and my siblings that there are still good people. Sure, she might have kept most of the money, but she could have kept all of the money and we would never have known. When I was 16, my dad wrote me out of his will and then hung himself in the garage. It was few months after my older brother had died in a car wreck. Funny thing is, we always got along. I was then kicked out of the house by his wife, without a single thing that was mine. It was on Christmas Eve, so I went to my mom's for a night, and when I came back to my dad's, the locks were changed. Not a single shirt, not a shoe, not a sock, nothing but the cloths on my back and the change in my pocket. When I was a clerk in law school at the State Court of Appeals, the adult children of a rich woman tried to invalidate the will. Basically, the woman was worth about $8 million and all the children were working professionals earning 6 or 7 figures. Well, the woman had used the same hairdresser for multiple years and left a considerable amount in a trust for the hairdresser's children's education. The remainder of the estate was given to different charities. Basically, the kids were mad they didn't get a cut. One of my former bosses was getting up in age and had no children. One day we were discussing family history and he mentioned how he still had the old family Bible his grandparents brought over from Germany, with the whole family tree handwritten into it, which I thought was an amazing thing to have. But he went on to lament that when he died it was going to have to go to his ungrateful, good-for-nothing niece, since the old rules of inheritance said she should get it, even though he knew she didn't care a thing about the family history. Several of us involved in the discussion tried to convince him that there had to be some other family member that would give it the respect it deserved, or barring that, a historical society that would know what to do with it. But he would have none of it, since that just isn't the way it is done. Years later I thought of this while attending his funeral and tried to figure out who was that niece. Maybe in hopes of broaching the subjects with her, but never could. I still wonder about it sometimes and hope, for his sake, that it ended up in good hands. Lawyer here. Not a thing with reading the will, just my favorite. Testator, dying guy, wanted to leave bequests to pretty much everybody he had known who was still living. In 3 countries, 1% to this guy, 2% to that lady, and then he kept changing his mind about one beneficiary or the other, which required the development of a spreadsheet to recalculate all the other bequests whenever he would change that guy's gift from 1% to 1.5%. Fortunately for sanity, it was a pot of cash. If he had changed physical bequests, half my spoons to my cousin Lydia, the other half, no, 5/8, we would have had to kill him. There is one famous device in a will from New York. A rich man left everything to his wife, provided she remarried. The will supposedly had the explanation that the testator put this condition on the will because he wanted to make sure at least one person truly mourned his death. I bequeath all my property to my wife on the condition that she remarry immediately. Then there will be at least one man to regret my death. Heinrich Heine, 1797 to 1856, German poet, journalist and literary critic, said on his deathbed, not in his will I think. An ancestor of mine in the rural UK in the 1700s died and left his farm and everything to his nephew, no children, with his surviving wife only getting the second best bed and a provision for her to receive 3 pounds of butter per week for the rest of her life. We thought this was incredibly mean, but we wonder whether this butter was meant as an income. I mean, who can eat 3 pounds of butter? On behalf of my dad here, he one time had a woman leave millions of dollars to 3 stray cats that she had been feeding, and he had to go catch them and put them in crates to be shipped to Texas, where they live a life of luxury in a cat resort. Another guy had a safety deposit box that was massive, like the size of a small dresser. Inside it was filled with coins that they had to count. Turns out it was several $100,000 worth of coins. Me and my wife went to a lawyer to have our wills drafted. The lawyer told us of a client he had that had a great deal of money. His kids were fighting over it before he was dead. The man liked the monkey exhibit in the local zoo. He liked to just watch them all the time. When he died, the lawyer had to tell his family he willed all of his money and estate to the zoo for the monkey exhibits. He now has a bench dedicated to his honor at one of the local zoos. He said they were livid and tried to fight. Lesson is, don't be petty and greedy, love your family unconditionally. Years ago, worked in a retirement community. Older man we knew was gay developed a late in life relationship and moved into the community with his gay lover. He was a career vet, multiple honors, a wall of medals. He was also a bit of a butthole most days, but he had moments over meals and his stories were fantastic. His children over 3 years never once visited him. He had a heart attack and knew he was going to die. His children showed up but demanded his lover leave for visits. In his will he left everything to his lover and his lover's one child from a former marriage. He wrote a long note about his kids' hypocrisy of not visiting, and their attitudes toward his lover. He left each of his 2 kids a pail of coal ash, to be deducted from his estate, had his estate pay for his lover's plot to be next to him and his wife. And in his long letter said that his kids, if they visited him in his death, would be reminded of why they didn't visit while he was alive. It was, frankly, awesome hearing his kids blow up about it. My sister spent a couple years working for a long-standing organization in Philly that's been accepting bequeathments since the late 18th century. Her job was to help organize the various trusts they had to administer, as well as going around advising people not to do things like this, and just leave them a lump sum. People had a habit of leaving them an annual trust. That $5 a year was a princely sum in 1813, but by now it's just a complete nuisance, or of leaving them ridiculously specific things to do every year. The worst example I remember was a woman who left funds to purchase books for schoolchildren in Liberia. Problem is, her funds now don't buy more than a couple books, and she left instructions for someone to deliver the books, not to ship them. When my grandparents on my mother's side were dying of cancer, my uncle, black sheep, piece of crap of the family who I've never met thank God, wanted to know what he was getting from the inheritance when they died. Not how's mom and dad or what can I do to help. My grandparents, being the people they were still going to give him an inheritance after all the fricked up things he did to them, but my mom, the power of attorney, convinced them that they shouldn't be manipulated by him anymore. They ended up writing him an email back telling him that he wouldn't be included in the will anymore. He ended up threatening to burn their house down, my house down, killing me and my family etc. for betraying him. And you know what my grandparents did? They ended up including him in the will and sending him exactly 1 penny in check form by mail. That was the last time I have heard from him since. I work for a brokerage firm and I often deal with account beneficiaries. We had a client leave his entire account to a stripper. After the client died, his wife discovered her husband had left his life savings to Jean Sparkles Smith. She was peed. Really peed. Lawyer here. We normally don't actually do a reading of the will here like they do in the movies. It's much more boring. We just fire up the probate and send notice to all the heirs. The weirdest one I saw was a guy that was worth about $2 million who left my car a jacket and $1 to my son. I hope it keeps him warm when he winds up sleeping under a bridge. The kid had a drug issue. I also had someone leave an antique commode to one of his kids. Yes, he considered an elderly toilet to be a family heirloom. The guy was actually pretty excited to get the toilet. It was the last thing they had left to remember their grandma by. I crap you not. Pun intended. A friend had two sisters when their father passed away. Their mom had died in their childhood. Anyway, years go by and the oldest daughter is the only one who keeps in contact with the father for various reasons. Dude was an abusive dong, played favorites, all of that crap. Older sister was obviously the favorite as she got everything. The other daughter and son, my friend, got $1 apiece. Oldest sister could have been a dong about it but decided to be bro status. They all sat down to dinner on a night and big sister was like, listen, dad left me all of this. It was a pretty sizable amount of money. She could have taken it and lived comfortably without working till the day she died. Maybe. Definitely. If she managed the money proper. She sat down with her little brother and sister and was like 3 ways even? Deal. End of it. You all would think that you would do the same for your brother, sister, best friend, whatever. You'd be surprised what people are really like when money is involved. Even a small amount of it. Fricked up. Not in this case though. I am not a lawyer but I am deputy public administrator and we find wills often. We deal with individuals who died without any known family or the family is estranged and we have to locate them. One of the wills I read said no fricking lawyers in the text and another one stated I would like coke powder stuffed in my ears and cremated. I'm a trust attorney. I can't tell you how many times the surviving spouse from a blended marriage cuts out the stepkids. They always try to justify it to me even though I really don't care. I'm not there to judge. Los Angeles residents are especially concerned about their pets. I've written trust where the pets inherit more than the kids. It's always awkward when I have to tell a child they were disinherited. No easy way to tell a person that. Not a lawyer, but an estate planning paralegal for many years. I've read, drafted or executed thousands of wills and trusts with clients. My first nitpicky comment is that the common belief that lawyers actually assemble the whole family and hold a reading of the will is entirely a construct of TV. You would never sit there and just read a will to people. It's mostly a bunch of legalese about bonds and payment of taxes and the powers of the executor. Only a very small portion of the will actually pertains to distributions, and in many cases it's just a paragraph stating that everything goes to the spouse if living, otherwise equally to the kids, or to the trust, which then says it all goes to spouse then kids. Believe it or not, they are usually pretty mundane. When strings are attached, it's usually just parents trying to make sure their kids go to college or they get a smaller distribution, or just have to wait longer to get their money. People who don't have kids usually name about 24 beneficiaries, which is cumbersome and annoying, especially since a lot of times they don't even have much money to divide. People with kids almost always just leave the money to them equally. Probably the most fricked up thing I've seen is a couple different clients who included provisions to disinherit kids and grandkids if they married a black person. That's their prerogative, and we'll serve them professionally, but we tended not to get too cozy or chatty at those signings, unlike with many of the nice clients with whom we would become friendly. Just get him in, get him out in those cases. I'm not a lawyer, but my family has an odd story involving a will. Several generations back, a woman, along with her brothers, in our family inherited a huge sum of money from her father, oil money in Oklahoma. At the time, women were allowed to inherit property assets if single, but all assets would have been transferred to her husband if she married. She wasn't too happy about the situation and, in protest, never took a husband. She had a few friends over the course of her life and lived a very comfortable life until dying of old age, at which time, her estate was divided amongst all of the female descendants in the family. My office has had two notably bizarre estates. The first, The mother stipulated in her will that one of her sons was not to receive his portion of her estate until he went to a dentist. The second stipulated that her 2 cats were to be euthanized upon her death and cremated with her. I just remembered another. Though it was in preparation of an older lady's will, she wanted it in there for her to be buried next to her late husband on the family property. He had died a few years before her, had to question whether his body or ashes are buried on the property, neither of which are particularly legal. Never got a firm answer from her. Growing up, my brother and I played rock, paper, scissors over every little thing. My dad wanted the will to say that if both him and mom died together, to have me and my brother play one hand of rock, paper, scissors for everything. Not a lawyer, but happened with my family. My grandfather-in-law's daughter tried to change his will without him knowing about it. After he passed, they were all gathered at the wedding. The only thing he left her was a really nice bronze sculpture of the devil, or Pan, playing the flute. I worked with trusts and estates for many years. One of my favorites was from a widower whose wife had died some 20 years earlier. After her death, he wanted to travel the country in a motorhome but was too grieved to do so. Years later, his old army buddy's wife died and they re-established their friendship in their retirement years. He finally bought the motorhome he'd dreamed of and left with his buddy to travel the continent, which they did for many years. After he passed away, he left a new motorhome to his buddy, but with one stipulation. The buddy was required to mount a set of 6-foot longhorns on the hood of the rig before it would become his. It sounded like a Texan versus non-Texan dispute they'd had for many years. Absolutely brilliant, and seemed like an amazing friendship. I would have loved to hear their traveling adventures over the years. My uncle left his business to his sister and never updated the will after he got married and had kids. They had an old water cooler he had taken from his office back to his home when it was replaced. His sister came to the wake to pick it up as it was still, technically, belonging to the business. What a total C. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.